And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles, and it's Good Friday. Hopefully it's going to be a good draft for the Texans. Wanted to try and get another episode out, as the dead spot of the weekend can sometimes leave you feeling short by Monday, as we're finally back at the top of the order for a long time. Right at the top of the draft, you got Ep.126, who for me, Lee, I've watched a couple of games. I watched the Florida State one yesterday, was my most recent one, and he's just so violent, but he almost runs past the play at times. It's like the enthusiasm is just, it's almost too much in it, and there's so many great sort of 3 or 4 second clips you can see him, knocking second and third level guys on the defense to the deck. But for me, he needs a bit of refinement. But I from the start, and now I still see him very much as a guard. And I know like he might be a Braden Smith type draft as a guard, and you can kick him out the tackle and he's successful. You never need to change it. But I think for me, he looks like a guard, and I think that's the issue though. If you're going to pick at third, can you take somebody who's going to play guard with the upside of tackle? That's a question of positional value. But what's your thoughts on Icky?
Yeah, no, I think you've nailed it. I think he is super, super violent. That's the first thing that kind of jumps off the tape, isn't it? And he did start as a guard and then obviously kicked out to tackle. Whether he kind of has that journey again in the NFL where he kind of does that, as you mentioned, then it's definitely something that he can do. He's definitely a super, super high upside player. And, his value is run blocking. So if you're going to run it a bunch, then you can maybe get away with him doing whatever he needs to, And sometimes with, when you're kind of constructing an offensive line, it's sometimes just about finding the best combination, isn't it? So if you've got a bit of versatility in there and you can get just a good player, I mean, you kind of saw it a little bit with the Jets recently in terms of them getting Vera Tucker and Beckham recently, who've got a bit of versatility in them. Just get them into training camp, bring in a couple of free agents and just see what happens. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that in particular. We saw it even going back a bit further with Zach Martin. He's got that versatility to play anywhere he wants, really, on either side as well. Obviously, players like that are really rare. I'm not really saying that Icky's one of those, but just get him, have a good time with him, and just see what you kind of come up with in terms of his best position, because he's still young, and he's you've got plenty more drafts where you can draft the opposite position to whatever he's going to play next year or something like that. Because unfortunately for the Texans, obviously the rebuild is underway. It's not like you're going to be competing for the next couple of years. So see it as a long-term project and just see where he best fits. But just get the highest upside players, I think.
Yeah, and I think he definitely is that. And I think that's the question, isn't it, between him and Evan Neal. I think Evan Neal is a day one starter. You can play on the left or right tackle. You'll probably never have too many troubles with him. He's probably above that sort of Cam Robinson level. He's probably not at the Penei Sewell kind of level, but he's sort of in between, I think, for me. I think in this one, I think Neal was gone. I think I'd probably take Neal over Ekwonu if you had the chance, just by pure kind of draft value alone.
I agree with that.
But it's an interesting one. I think he's just more polished, and I think the fact that he's a bona fide tackle, or a view to tackle if you move on from Tunsil. And I think, it was actually Peter King again the previous week. He said you got to think they're going to take the safest guy who's going to most likely get a second contract and is going to just be a good player, because that's what they need to try and find. And I think Evan Neal fits that potentially. And then at 13, I mean, obviously the big value is for us is to trade back. I think ultimately if we can, somebody gets 13 might be easier to trade than 3, I would think, just in terms of draft value. But they got Jordan Davis from Georgia. Now, I watched him and I just thought the guy's just so big, so his pad level just by definition is higher. I know he's 325 pounds. I watched the 2 games against Bama, and he did make a couple of plays in those, but for me, when I first watched him, I said, I'm just looking at how they set the protections against him, and it's 88. And what's his name? Jalen. What's the surname? The guy that's coming out next year in the middle of the defense is the one they're really concerned about, and obviously he's going to be a top 3 pick, if not first overall next year. Unbelievable player. The surname escapes me now. Name blindness getting into this, but so he ultimately he's the kind of guy that I thought, actually he gets outshined. I think Devonta Wyatt at times, when you watch him, he's a great gap shooter, but again they're just rotating in and out, so the sample size isn't great. So I watched a couple of games and I just thought the protections, the way the Bama set against him, they were kind of happy just to let the guard of the centre just go one-on-one, and that was enough for them to get the ball out on rhythm, even on kind of deeper drops. And so I thought, but I thought he was being overhyped. Then I stuck on the Clemson game, and it was unreal, genuinely unreal. And then he had a couple other games Against Kentucky as well was just a hell of a performance. He just, every time he was on the field, he was doing something. So I kind of went from a journey of him. I've gone, yeah, okay, I get it. He's big, okay, but can you draft a sort of Vince Wilfork type at the the top of the draft, and then ultimately, any smalls amount of snaps in other games, he just kind of completely wrecked shop. The Clemson game just being one. Clemson couldn't get the ball out.
Yeah.
And I know they've regressed, but it was a mess up front. It really was. And that's part of playing with all these other guys like Walker and what have you. Obviously Anderson was out at the start of the year and then he kind of disappeared. Obviously he was off field issues, but I thought, what do you think of Davis? Because I've kind of gone a full 180 on him from the start to now.
Yeah, I watched him probably almost a year ago, last summer in summer scouting, and I wasn't overly impressed, if I'm honest. I kind of made sort of third round grade on him, to be honest with you. I didn't have him too highly rated at all. I was really down on the defensive line class as a whole, which I think as a whole has risen throughout the year. I think there's a couple of things with him. Firstly, I know that everyone kind of holds the snap count against him. I feel like, firstly, I think that's because they had such a rotation that they had to kind of use them all and kind of get through them and keep guys fresh. It can be a positive as well, because obviously less tread on the tyres and things like that. I don't think it's beyond him to play on a third down. I think he's got more pass rushing potential just from a pure power point of view than people are giving him credit for. So I do think he does have, I don't think he is a pure two-down player in the NFL. I'm not going to say he's going to play every third down either, but I do think there's more potential than people are giving him credit for. The other positive for me, for Davis, is the fact that you just don't get players like that big and that powerful and that strong and quick and things like that every draft. So, if it's a player that you can use, and, you've got a defensive head coach now in Lovie Smith, if he thinks that you can use him, then go and get him. If you think you can't get a player like that every year, so just go and grab him. I mean, like you say, he's big enough and strong enough in the middle that for a lot of guards, and we know injuries happen, in the NFL every year, and it wrecks offensive lines. If you're going to go up against someone like Jordan Davis in the middle of the season when you're not the first choice, then he's going to absolutely dominate you. And it's going to make the offensive game plan change, because they're not going to be running up the middle anymore. So if you can funnel things towards your help, which obviously is the big thing on defense, then, if you know that they're cutting off that supply line through the middle between the tackles in terms of the running game, then you can focus all your attention on the wide sort of angles, and the wide zone obviously is a big part of a lot of offenses nowadays. So maybe it's a bit of an antidote against that in some small way. But yeah, I think he's a really good player. Whether I draft him at 13 or not, I'm not sure. And obviously, I'm sat here as a Chargers fan thinking, are we going to draft him at 17 after our?
Well, that's the perfect spot
for our struggles against the run last year.
Yeah.
I mean, we've addressed a lot of things in free agency as well, but it wouldn't be a pick that I'd be upset with, put it that way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But another thing, I guess, just quickly to kind of dive in again, I guess our two teams are in different positions, whereas we can maybe afford to take a nose tackle in the first round, whereas the Texans might need more premium positions at that position.
Well, that's it. Yeah. You're talking about doing a tier 1 or tier 2 position. Tier 1 being corner, edge, quarterback, and tackle. So, and then you get into the sort of second tier, which is guard, defensive tackle, safety, and wide receiver. So I think that's the kind of the next kind of tier down, if you like. But the next spot at 37 they had in the CBS mock draft was Kaiir Elam, a guy I've not watched enough. Somebody told me to go and watch the tape against Jameson Williams as the acid test. I've not done that yet. But what do you think of Elam from Florida?
You will get games like that where you'll have someone recommend a game to you, but then you'll have completely the opposite as well, where he just gets absolutely fried on a lot of plays. He is super, super grabby, super physical. He's got all the length and all the desirable measurables that you'd want from an NFL front office point of view, but I'm not a huge fan of his. I've got about a third round grade on him. I know that Kieran, who did him for our guide, had even lower grade on him. But yeah, he's not a player that I'd be really enamored with. I know that I've seen a few mock drafts with him going 17 to the Chargers. Maybe that was before we got JC Jackson. And that was a pick that I would be really unhappy with. I think he's going to be a penalty machine. I think that good route runners are just going to be able to shake him off, because I think he tries to stay with people with physicality rather than technique, which would really scare me. Personally, I'm not a player that I've really liked. I think he needs rebuilding again from the ground up. So, looking at the Texans corner situation, he'd be an immediate starter and probably looking at being their CB1 next to Steven Nelson, right? So whether that would be a situation where I'd want him in is questionable for me.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure. I've only seen kind of small pieces. I think for me it's Emerson from Mississippi State. Maybe if you can get somebody like Booth in 13, if that's not too early.
I like Booth much better.
Yeah. Well, that's it, and I think he's suited to his, guard like even a Kyler Gordon. I think from the couple of Washington games, I think he would be a guy that
I think just to jump in, I know that we're talking a lot about scheme fit, and I think obviously with the Texans probably running quite a lot of zone under Lovie Smith, I think any Washington corner, if you can get Gordon or even McDuffie, if you can get at 13, I think both of those guys fit because Washington's defense is essentially just all zone.
Yeah, no, exactly. Both those, I think, and that's, I suppose it's is McDuffie, is 13 too early? Maybe not. I don't know. It just depends who comes off the board. But who would you say your ideal picks at 3 and 13 are then for the Texans? If you think maximum value, obviously you've got a lot. There's going to be somebody's got to trade up at some point. You've got to think whether it's definitely Carolina are in there. Is somebody going to jump them? It might get Matt real sad, but we'll see. It looks like the parting shot at Pittsburgh from the GM there is going to be a quarterback, or certainly they've made every sort of intimation that will be the case. So it may change, but even if it's just two picks in the top 15 rather, who would you say would be ultimate value upside guys that you could say you've taken a first step towards a new era?
Yeah. Well, depending on how the first couple of picks go, I think you've just got to go after a top player at a premium position at number 3. So pick your sort of favourite position really, in terms of if you feel like you need help on the offensive line.
We've already need everything really.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I think what we're looking at is you're looking at with number 3, you're thinking either edge or you're thinking offensive tackle. And I think go ahead and take Evan Neal if that's what you want to do. We've both said that he'd be the pick for us, as in like our first tackle off the board. Go and pick him. Like you say, you compare him with Tunsil. You're probably strengthening your offensive line exponentially just from having 2 great bookends. If you want to go the other way and go for edge, I'd go for Thibodeau. Looking like Hutchinson's going to be off the board. Trevor Walker, if Thibodeau goes 2 to Detroit or something like that, or he's not there, I'd be a bit more, I'm not sure about that at number 3. And then you're probably not even thinking edge at all, potentially, because the drop-off after that, like you say, is to the players that we've kind of talked about before in terms of, Karl Aftis or Ajabo, even though he's not going to play, and, Jermaine Johnson, for example, and maybe a couple of other guys in the mix for that as well. So maybe if it's a bit of a run on edge to begin with, maybe want to trade back to somewhere in the top 10 for Trevon Walker. Not really take him at 3, I don't know, but whether you get the option to do that, obviously you need a dance partner to do a trade, I don't know, but I think those are the 2 positions that I'll be looking at for number 3. And then for 13, it's a bit of a no man's land, isn't it then? Because you're looking at the tackle or the edge class and then thinking, well, if we get one at 3, then can you get the other at 13? The answer is probably no, because all the good edges and top tackles are probably off the board at that point, the real high-end blue chip players. So then you could just looking at your board and thinking who's the best player available. And one guy who could be available, who isn't really a position that's I'd really say is premium, but is definitely a premium player, is Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah.
And he, his combine might mean he's dropping, his position might mean he's dropping a little bit by that point, and the Texans might be looking at that thinking, we're going to get a really, really high-end defender who can do a lot of things for us on the back end, and let's just pull the trigger on that rather than, swinging for a corner like Booth, who, good player, fits the scheme, will do a lot of good things for you, but he doesn't have that high ceiling as Kyle Hamilton does, despite him being a safety. So ideally, in my sort of ideal picks, I would nail it down to maybe thinking something like, Evan Neal and Kyle Hamilton, I would say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, if we walk away with those 2 guys, Kyle Hamilton is just, I would take him at 3, to be honest. I think he's that good. And it's not traditional, but I think the point is he plays gunner on special teams. He can play in the slot. You can play him. You can play him outside as a corner if you have to. You can play him he's great in the box. He's maybe you couldn't leave him on island and cover one, but I think he's could he find that in time with the right package, with the right combination of people around him? Yeah, absolutely. You can play him as a sub linebacker, on third down. I think there's so much you can get from him. Whereas if you draft a tackle, it's all or nothing at that point. Whereas he can do so much. So ideally, as you said, you take one of the more premium positions, and he's there at 13. Whether he makes it there or not, I don't know. I don't think he would. I think he's too clean. I think his tape's too good and to get there. But that would be the absolute dream, I suppose. Either him or Stingley being there at 13.
The other aspect of it is obviously, like I said before, the Texans have got a lot of picks. So what do? Do you package a couple up and move ahead of Minnesota maybe? Who's another potential?
Or Washington, exactly, up to 10 maybe. But it's a tough one, I think. Ultimately you're in a great position to get some good players, but it's perhaps not the best draft class to get them. We'll see in time. In terms of your guys in this class, Lee, have you got any guys that you are higher on, or you think are sleepers or underrated that are going to surprise some people as pros?
Yeah, I've got a couple actually, and a couple that might kind of fit with the Texans actually as well. Obviously, with what we've just been talking about, if we get those perfect picks that we've just kind of mentioned, if we're looking at the pick, what's the early pick in the second round? 30 something, is it?
37, yeah.
37. You're probably looking at someone like Boye Mafe, as I mentioned before, Arnold Ebiketie, I think, as an upside.
So Mafe, sorry to jump in there, but Mafe, I've watched him a couple of games. He just does nothing. And then obviously there's some fantastic highlights. Obviously great at the Senior Bowl, but going up against the more premium guys, a bit like Sam Williams in the sense. I watched Sam Williams against Bama. Just was like, well, doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
he got Evan Neal chewed him up, and I think he could have played 8 quarters, and I don't think he would have got pressure against Evan Neal. It was just one of those ones. But again, it just when you only take that time frame, you come away with that perception.
I think with both of those guys that I've mentioned, Ebiketie's in the same mould really.
Yeah, raw.
Exactly, raw upside guys, and what you want is those guys who are going to potentially explode. I would say after that, after that first round. And Mafe wasn't even a full starter in college, a full-time starter, so he's got a lot of polish to be added. But I think if you do hit on someone like that, then it's almost like an extra first rounder in that sense. And I think you can afford, especially with the 2 first-round picks, you can kind of afford to take that luxury sort of pick in the next one, really. If you wanted a safer pick, another one of my guy almost is Cam Thomas from San Diego State.
Big fan.
A player I would say, quite far ahead of the consensus. I've got a second round grade on him, and taking him at 37 I think would be good. He's more of like a solid guy, a lower ceiling guy, but he's got a lot of versatility to play up and down the line, and I think high motor player, high character player who will do good things. But a couple of other players from other positions. I know I've talked about edge a lot. I know that the Texans are probably looking for something at running back. Rashad White from Arizona State. Really top end receiving back. And I think he can do more on the ground than people giving him credit for. He's got a lot of speed. I think he did a lot with the combine. And I think he's going to be a good player in the league. And I think he's going to be one of these kind of mid-round running backs that people probably don't take too much notice of until they're getting a 1,000-yard season in their rookie year. And I think he's going to be potentially one of those. And especially, considering his receiving prowess, he's going to be on the field a heck of a lot, I think, in the early throes of his career if he gets an opportunity. A couple of tight ends as well. Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State, I think he's one.
Yeah, Texas had him in for a visit this weekend.
Oh, really? Didn't know that. That's interesting then. I think he is one that kind of reminds me of Dawson Knox, the Buffalo tight end, who didn't get a lot of opportunity in college to make a lot of plays. I don't think, if I remember right, Knox actually scored a touchdown in college. I think he got under 100 receptions throughout his whole career at Ole Miss. And now he's one of the better tight ends in the league. And I think Ruckert's kind of got that in his locker. I think he's an all-round tight end. He's got good hands. And he just didn't get the opportunities because why throw to tight end when you've got Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith and Jigba to throw to? So, I just don't think he's kind of really scratched the surface in terms of his potential there. So, I've got a couple. And one last one, if I can. Alontae Taylor, I think, is a real high upside corner from Tennessee. I think he's got an athletic profile that will fit a lot of teams, especially, the league is becoming so much about speed and versatility. I think if we can polish him up, I think he has got a lot of potential to kind of match a lot of these speed guys that are coming into the league. So, there's a handful there for you.
Yeah, well, I watched him. I put a clip actually of Alontae Taylor, and I instantly said fit for zone, and it was against Matt Corral and Ole Miss, and he was trailing the receiver, trying to pass him on to the safety just before he got out of his zone. And but he had the wherewithal to turn his head round, saw the ball was getting released, drove on the other man that was coming into his zone before the other guy had even left, and got a PBU. And I just thought, that guy's perfect for zone, because ultimately you got to break on the ball, you got to have awareness, you got to have communication to pass somebody on. All these things that we couldn't do in the early stages of last year. Got a little bit better when we mixed in cover 1, cover 3 kind of looks, and kind of got people guessing a little bit, but. Yeah, I thought Alontae Taylor at Tennessee was absolutely one of those guys that we could think good. I'm glad I'm starting to trust my eyes, Liam. It's getting there.
Yeah,
it's getting there.